Hello, and welcome to the Community Affairs Committee's Leadership Webinar, Using LinkedIn Sales Navigator to Save and Grow Your Chapter. And our presenter today is Bobbi Werner, STC Associate Fellow. Today's recording is a re-recording of the original, so we will not have questions and answers at the end. And now I'd like to turn over the program to Bobbi.
Hi, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here and to share this presentation once again. I guess we had some technical issues with the recording the last time around, so I get a chance to give it another go. I am going to turn off the camera during the presentation, and I think it will stay off for the duration since we won't have Q&A at the end. Okay, so using LinkedIn Sales Navigator to save and grow a chapter. Let's see, make my cursor work. There we go. I won't linger here very long. For those of you who get the recording and want to review some of my bio, you're welcome to do that. Thank you, Anne Marie, for the introduction, but this gives a bit more background about my history in tech comm and what I'm up to more recently. So I'll just leave this for you to take a look at on your own. What I want to do, though, first as part of the presentation is to provide a bit of context. Context is everything in our case in the case of Central New York chapter. Back in August 2016, we had a membership of 9, and I know that might seem alarming to some of you chapter leaders out there. But it was a healthy number for Central New York. But then suddenly at the beginning of 2017, our membership had dropped to 2. Well, we were no longer feeling comfortable, with the companies who decided not to renew memberships in our area. Some council members who thought that Central New York was a dying beast and they moved their memberships to Rochester, or at least devoted their attention to Rochester if they were members there already. And there were some other departures as well. So there we were left with just 2 members in Central New York. And unfortunately, the other member of the chapter was not able to take on a leadership role at the time. So we were confronting the reality of having to explore 3 separate options for Central New York. Would we fold? Would we merge with STC Rochester? And we were actually getting a lot of encouragement to do that. STC Rochester is a very strong chapter, and it would make perfect sense for us to join up with them. But the third option was to resist all of that and regroup and rebuild. And my heart was really committed to keeping Central New York alive. I thought that we had a purpose and a role to play in Central New York. So I decided that the third option was the one we would pursue. As I hinted at just a moment ago, in order for the chapter to remain viable, we needed to have 2 leadership roles filled. We needed to have a president and a treasurer. And as I mentioned, the other member of our chapter at the time was unable to serve on council. So we were really in a bind. And if we were going to survive, if we were going to rebuild, clearly recruitment was going to be an important part of our work ahead. And so I'm racking my brain. I'm trying to figure out if I could not tap the other member of our chapter, what else could I do? So I called in some favors. I gave a call to my friend Dave Daly, former employer. We went to graduate school together. We'd been friends for years. Years ago, he had been active in STC, in the Central New York chapter, in fact. And so I called him up. I said, Dave, I need a favor. What would you think about joining STC and serving as president? And I said, you don't have to do a thing. I will do everything that we need to do to meet STC requirements, but we need to have a separate president on the books. And so he said, oh yeah, I think I can do that. So we immediately added him to our roles, and we were up to 3. So we met the minimum requirements, and then of course we had to do much more to rebuild this chapter. So we put our heads together. We planned a brunch on a Saturday in April. And we also discovered that some new person had joined the chapter. So we made sure we invited her. I tapped everybody I knew who was still in the area. And I think we had at least a dozen people at this brunch. So it was very encouraging. And fortunately, we had some individuals who attended who were willing to consider leadership roles in the chapter. They were full of ideas and suggestions on things we might do for upcoming programs. So we collected their ideas, and we decided that we would plan another event in June. And as I mentioned, they were the ones who were more vocal and engaged, were clearly beginning to distinguish themselves as potential chapter leaders. And that came to be quite nicely. But in the background, of course, now we had 12 in attendance, but not 12 people who would become members of the chapter. We're still very much committed to finding out who else is out there who could potentially join STC CNY. So this is the point where Sales Navigator comes into play. I had been a member of LinkedIn for quite some time, but I did nothing more than the free LinkedIn membership. I didn't take full advantage of all of the resources that were there, but I thought, well, maybe this is the time for me to consider a premium membership. And so I was looking through the various options that LinkedIn provided. And, career, I was pretty settled there. Business, wasn't running or growing a business exactly. I wasn't hiring anybody, but sales, as I read this description, it began to resonate a bit with some of our goals for STC CNY. When we're talking about building relationships and looking for prospects and following leads and that sort of thing to kind of market the chapter and capture the attention of people who perhaps didn't even know we existed. So I looked at that and I thought, well, I need to get some more information. And I do have a little note on the bottom that currently, if you get a monthly subscription to Sales Navigator Professional, it's $79.99 a month plus tax. So just a tidbit of information to tuck away. But I'm someone who really, if I'm going to spend money, remember, I went the cheap route. I didn't pay any kind of a premium before. If I'm going to pay for something, I need to be persuaded that it's worth my time and my investment. And so I started looking around on Sales Navigator to see what it said about itself. And these are all of its features that it lists as selling points. And I'm looking at this, and there were a couple of these items that I connected with on a somewhat superficial level. Advanced lead search and company search. I mean, that intrigued me a little bit. I wasn't quite sure what that meant. Extended LinkedIn network access. So what exactly does that mean? What gets extended? Some of these other things I would have to explore a bit more, but I'm looking for Sales Navigator Professional to sell itself to me. And so I still wasn't convinced at this point. So I did a little bit of browsing on the internet to find out what others said about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And I pulled this directly from a site online. Is LinkedIn Sales Navigator really worth it? You know, it's paying 80 bucks, 85 bucks a month. Is that worth the money? And so this is where I started to become convinced that there was something to this tool that would enable not just me as an individual, but me as a member of the Central New York chapter to identify people and find a way to connect with them. So more targeting filters. Sales Navigator grants access to LinkedIn's entire database of users. So this is where that extended network feature kicks in, makes it super easy to build highly specific lists of prospects using advanced search filters only made available for Sales Navigator users. Okay, so here's Sales Navigator distinguishing itself from other search options, advanced search filters, prospects that are in the same profession I'm in. I'm looking to see how this works. Unlimited prospecting. So one thing that's really interesting is, you know, that you can go navigate wherever. There is no limit on the number of prospects that you can identify in Sales Navigator. So that lack of a cap was really important to me. And then this talking point, Sales Navigator generates timely lead alerts that you can use to engage warm or dark leads. I don't know what that means in marketing speak, I will admit that. But the rest of the statement, through features like job change notifications, alerts when a prospect posts content, and company news alerts. We will see some evidence of that in some of the screens that I share with you in a minute. And that can be, can open up a door to a conversation that you might not have otherwise. So after reviewing this information, I decided to give it a shot. I went ahead and I purchased a premium subscription for a month, which back when I did this, it was a little bit cheaper than what I published on the other screen. But then I also got approval from our president, Dave Daly, to get reimbursed for the cost, because the whole purpose of this was to grow the chapter. And so we thought it was a worthy investment for Central New York. And once I work through all of these details, I think you'll agree with me that it was as well. So where do we start? First, a couple of acknowledgements with this screen. This is not one of the screens I pulled. If I didn't say it before, I was a Sales Navigator premium subscription holder for a month, and only a month. And so what I was able to do was to tap one of my friends who had Sales Navigator to help me put together some of these screens for the presentation. So I'm thankful for her. That's Donna Reedman. But you know, I am not in there right now. I haven't been in there for a while, but it may be something that I'll be getting into again very soon in order to help not just Central New York grow, but other chapters in STC. What I had asked Donna to do was to pull together some screens that would illustrate how the interface looks and how easy it is to search for something as basic as technical writers in our profession in a particular area. So you can see that over here on the left side of the screen, there are terms that you can use for your search, and it will even prompt you to consider some other alternatives. There are a number of filters that you can choose as well. And with this particular one, we kept it really simple. It was just technical writer and the Syracuse area. Syracuse is right in the middle of Central New York. So that made sense geographically as a filter option. And with that simple search, we produced 235 results, again, just based on technical writer as being a job title in someone's LinkedIn profile. But these are some of the other things that I mentioned that were interesting because who has changed their job in the past 90 days? So who might be new to your area? Who posts on LinkedIn and is really active? Might that be somebody who could be a prospect for your chapter or your community? So, I thought this was really interesting, but, I want to highlight a couple of other things. I mean, not only do you get the individual's name, and you want to track that, of course, but also you will get a listing of their employers right here in these cells, which is also interesting because one of the big revelations for me was just the number of businesses in the area that had technical writers that I was totally unaware of before Sales Navigator. A couple of other fun facts. I mentioned Donna already. She lives in the Metro New York area, but is actually a member of STC CNY. She connected with me through the mentor board and is still a member of the Central New York chapter. And as I said, she does favors for me occasionally. Another fun fact, Julie Hill was someone who moved to the Syracuse area from Portland, Oregon, had been working remotely for a company in Portland, and was not aware that we existed. She had been a member of the Willamette Valley chapter in the Portland area, but that chapter folded. So when she moved back to this area, again, hadn't heard anything about STC CNY, but knew about STC, and ultimately became a member of the chapter. And I was able to hire her. You can see that she worked at Welch Allen. I hired her as a member of my team. So certainly benefits beyond adding to your community. I added to my network and found a great prospect for a role on my team. And then also Jennifer Brennan, who attended one of our events, along with one of her colleagues from Lockheed Martin. And interestingly, the colleague has since joined the chapter, even though Jennifer hasn't to date. So we'll still work on that. But just in this one search page, already interesting connections to STC CNY. Here's another search that I think it's striking that it turns up the same people pretty much, but because it's a bit more focused, and again, the only other change here was the list of industries, which you can narrow or enlarge however you want, but you can use some of those other filters as well to narrow your search. With this narrowing or with these filters, we came up with 95 results as opposed to 200, whatever it was on the previous screen. And then, the narrower your search, you will get, these variables up here. These numbers will change alongside your search results. So, just think strategically if you use a tool like this, how you might filter and what kind of information you're looking for. Maybe there are people in a certain field or profession that you want to target. Maybe they've come into your view. They've gotten your attention, and it's been pretty much overlooked as a target for STC. But now they take on that new meaning for STC. That might be something to explore. So what do you do once you've done this search and you're trying to figure out what's the next thing to do? Well, this is really important. I don't want anyone to lose sight that ultimately you're going to have to capture data, but you're also going to have to make some decisions about the various filters you choose to use. Certainly geography makes a difference. And I popped this screen up here to highlight kind of the scope or the area that Central New York covers. And I can say this confidently because we have a member in Oswego, and we have a member in Albany, and we had a member who, well, still have her as a member, but she used to work down here in the Corning, Elmira area, but actually lived in northern Pennsylvania. We have people in Auburn and in the Finger Lakes area, stretching almost all the way to Rochester. We also have a member from California and a member from Oregon. So, you know, we don't include those in our search in Sales Navigator, obviously, but if we're going to target a geography, it needs to make sense in terms of, you know, physical location. So these were the major cities or metropolitan areas. I use that word probably a bit generously for some of these towns, but these are names of towns where we have representation, or at least have had representation in the past. And so there's at least justification to use these as a starting point for our focus. So for every community out there, you would want to do a similar kind of thing. What is your area? Where do you want to focus your attention geographically? So then once you've established the scope of your search, that's when the hard work happens or follows. What I have here is just an excerpt from the spreadsheet that I maintain. And you can see that I had it organized separate ways. Just a general list of contacts, a version or a tab where they're sorted by email. So if I had email contacts, I could just do a sorted by location, which is very useful if you're trying to host an event in an area. I will tell you that one of the things that Central New York chapter did was it took some of its events on the road to be closer to some of our, where more of our members worked. And it wasn't Central New York, or it wasn't in the immediate Syracuse area where most of our activities take place. We actually drove an hour or so south to Cortland so that, you know, another company that had 13 members of our chapter could attend. It just made it easier for them to join us. We'll meet somewhere in the middle, and they've actually done that twice over the past few years. But getting back to the spreadsheet, you'll want to capture some pretty basic information. And if anyone is interested, you're more than welcome to ask for a copy or a sample of my spreadsheet so that you know what I captured. But, you know, you can just see, looking across the top, last name, first name, email, social media, contact info. I mean, there's some basic stuff that will come up in LinkedIn, but unless you're connected with those individuals, you won't get their email address in many cases. So, you know, be very aware of that there's more work to be done by connecting to people in order to get that more direct contact information. I organized a column with position and title because it's also interesting, I think, to know what people call themselves when they work in tech companies they worked for. So, you know, you could do a search and organize this and start doing outreach to lots of companies in your area. So, you know, just think of that in terms of strategy for marketing STC or your chapter. And then there are various locations. As we move to the right, I also have a column with notes on my interactions with these individuals, and if they were part of a mailing, I would include that. The color coding is interesting. Anything that you see that's red is indicating an individual who wanted to be removed from our list. So that's really important. when people say, I don't want to hear from you, you need to honor that. But everybody else that you see listed here, either no feedback or happy to hear from me or STC. So this is a bit more of a structured response to some of the stuff I've mentioned already. With Sales Navigator Professional, you get 20 InMail messages. That means that you can send to 20 people that you are not connected with yet on LinkedIn over the course of a month. And so I think it's a period of 30 days, and you can send no more than 20 messages within that time frame. But as you progress, into the next week, you would see the number fluctuate a little bit. So if you're sending out all 20 messages in 1 week, then you're going to be stuck. You're not going to be able to reach out with InMail to anyone else on LinkedIn until 30 days later. But if you stagger that, you will experience the advantage of being able to reach out to 5 or so people every week in kind of a rolling mode. Once you connect, you'll want to copy the email addresses that will then become visible to you as people are linked to you. And I will say that while I was doing this, noting that it was my LinkedIn account, it wasn't a chapter account, it was my personal account. Over the course of this activity with Sales Navigator, I increased my LinkedIn connections by hundreds. Not all of whom were in the Central New York area, but it was a stunning increase in the number of links I had. I think there's a lot of discretion you need to exercise when you reach out to people on LinkedIn or through any other social media. I know a lot of people who are deeply offended when the first email they receive from someone that has reached out to them or connected with them is a marketing ploy or sales pitch. So be really careful about that. Don't wear out your welcome. Don't do anything that's going to jeopardize the reputation of your organization. So exercise as much discretion as you can in all of that. And as I said before, when people don't want to be a part, don't press it. It's not the time for the heavy-handed sales pitch. It is the time to step back and say, okay, we'll honor your request. Even after you do connect with people, you always have to give them the option to opt out, to withdraw from the communication. So make sure that you provide that opt out and that you honor those requests. Of course, as you're compiling all this information, what can you do with it? Well, you can certainly create a prospects mailing list. You can categorize your lists any way you want. You can categorize them by Syracuse area or Albany area, Capital District, however it makes sense, so that you can do a targeted communication. Whatever serves your community the best would be worth considering. And as I note in this final bullet, it would be wrong of me not to tell you just how much labor was involved in capturing this information over the course of a month. And I have heard stories from people who have tried this in some other metropolitan areas where they would see a list of thousands of prospects. And what do you do with that? It's very daunting. I did this for a month, as I said, and I spent almost every evening and good chunk of my weekends trying to compile the information, because I knew at the end of 30 days, I wouldn't have access to the information anymore. So, because of the somewhat desperate situation our chapter was in, I could justify that for myself. Not everybody can do that, and I fully understand that. But if you are in a bind, you might make this kind of activity a priority. And if there are others that you can engage in the process, to lighten the load a bit, I think that would be something I would encourage as well. So as I hinted at before, this was a very successful endeavor, activity for the Central New York chapter. In 2017, we had 2 members, but as a result of the prospects we identified, we were able to, in 1 year, increase our membership by 1,000+%, which isn't a whole lot when you start out with 2. But where we are now is at 35, and we are strong, we are vibrant, we are growing. We have a lot to celebrate, as I note in the heading. In 2019, we won a Pacesetter award for what we did with Sales Navigator. We earned, the very first time we ever submitted for a CAA award, we were recognized as a gold community and the most improved community in STC, which was just more heartwarming than I can even tell you. And the other thing we celebrate is that people are catching on to this. I was able to do a presentation at Leadership Day at the summit in Denver, Colorado. And, that's when, word of Sales Navigator began to circulate. And it is encouraging to know how many different communities are trying this out. But for a lot of you, I know this may be the first time you're hearing about it. So certainly something to consider. But even with all of that, even with everything that Sales Navigator has to offer, it's not the whole story. And I want to emphasize some of the other factors that have played a critical role in growing and rebuilding STC CNY. So I stand very strongly behind the notion that if you don't have something valuable to offer prospects to STC chapters, people might come once or twice, but they're not going to stay. There has to be something of value to them through the networking, through the programming, through what your chapter has to offer to impress upon them the value of STC community membership. I am very thankful that even after that first brunch meeting in April of 2017, that we were then able to identify some of the chapter leaders that we have in place right now, and who have really done amazing work, being supportive of one another and extending our mission to other people, just letting people know about STC CNY and doing what they could to promote the chapter. We have 2 companies in the chapter who are tied in with CVP memberships, the Corporate Value Program. The company where I work supports that, as does Raymond Corporation, who I mentioned earlier. We were very encouraged to hear the manager of the TechCom team tell me at a program event that not only did her team get approval to join the Rochester chapter, but they also doubled up and were members of the Central New York chapter. So immediately, I mean, that was overwhelming. It grew our chapter by many percentage points. And then I wanted to say something about the mentor board, which I hinted at before. For me, the mentor board is a place for me to share expertise, to connect with new people, new to TechCom. And one of the things that I impress upon everyone who connects with me through mentor board is the need to be part of a community. And so it doesn't matter where my mentees are in the country. but I will encourage them to be a part of a community. And so I mentioned that we have a member from Portland, Oregon. She's my mentee, and she is a member of the Central New York chapter of STC. Donna Reedman from the New York Metro chapter is a member of STC. We have a member in Florida who connected with me through the mentor board, and Florida has one chapter that covers a lot of ground, but it's not she's unable to travel the distance to participate in some of their programs. I'm sure it would have been different in this COVID environment, that she might have tapped into some remote programs. But, you know, at the time that we first connected, that wasn't an issue or a consideration. And so she became a member of the Central New York chapter. So what does that mean? For me, it's not just you know, with the adding in numbers and so forth. It's the value and the importance of relationship. And I think more than, you know, other benefits that people might see, for me, this is really important. So I don't want us to lose sight of that as members and leaders in STC. We need to connect with people. And I think people want to be connected with in return. So don't diminish the importance of that. So that's all I have. I know this is a little bit different. We had some questions last go round, but if anyone does have questions after viewing this and you want to reach out to me, please follow up. I've put my email address and my LinkedIn page, and also I provided a link to the Central New York chapter webpage so that you can take a look at some of the things we've done, some of the programs we've offered. You can see a little bit of our history and some of the reasons we have to celebrate. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobbi, and thank you for re-recording this program for us. For future programs from the CAC, we invite you to visit www.cac-stc.org, where you will find this recording and other recordings from past programming. Thank you.